Hi, welcome to the third summary video in our Leadership in Extraordinary Times series. I'm Andrew Stephen, the Associate Dean of Research and a L'Oreal Professor of Marketing here at Oxford's Said Business School. In this video, we're going to look at some of the discussions I shared with colleagues in the areas of marketing, media, and communications over the course of our series. During those discussions, we explored, among many other things, how COVID-19 has changed how brands, media organizations, and leaders talk not only to consumers, but also to their own people. We looked at where some organizations had gone wrong, and of course suggested how perhaps they could communicate better. So let's start by hearing from Moen Hennessey's Global Head of Consumer Insights, Julie Coleman, and Teradata's Chief Marketing Officer, Martin Etherington, about what they said of the situation back in April.
The only way that we've been able to keep in touch during lockdown is through technology and through digital means. And that's something that's completely new for most consumers. This really does represent a fundamental transformation of how we live our lives.
We've actually transitioned everything we've done physically to virtually. We've done that really in the last 3 weeks. And also what we're doing is changing the way that we think about communicating content. So we've got now a publisher's mindset with content, and now we're becoming broadcasters.
As Julie and Martin suggest there, the rapid move to online has gone hand in hand with an explosion in communication from individuals and all types of organizations. Unfortunately, there's a flip side to this, however. COVID-19 has given rise to misinformation, conspiracy theories, and other sources of questionable information that are spreading only too easily while we're living much of our lives online. Rachel Botsman, a colleague who's a fellow in management practice specializing in trust here at Oxford Said, explained why this issue is so damaging and difficult to deal with.
Information is life or death in these situations. And I think we shouldn't forget that that's what is at stake, that we need information as much as food and water in a time of crisis. And when water becomes contaminated, it's toxic. When information becomes contaminated, it can literally harm people.
Professor Phil Howard of the Oxford Internet Institute shared some of his research findings on how misinformation has been deliberately spread as part of a campaign to undermine Western democracy. There are structural problems with our information systems that allow this to happen. But, as he and Rachel said when we talked, part of the problem can be just how receptive people may in fact be to these ideas.
There's a small segment of the population, between a quarter and a third, that looks for this stuff and will share it. We want to find conspiracies. Actually, we want to find the truth. And for many of us, that means trying to find a sensationalist story or an extreme story that seems to bear some inside information. And so we have these cognitive biases, and some of us like to chase that misinformation and share it.
I think part of what actually fuels our appetite and amplifies the emotional vacuum that often misinformation and conspiracy theories fill is when we don't feel like we're receiving enough information from government and credible organizations. So we tend to talk about misinformation, information overload, but what can actually drive people to seek information, particularly from celebrities and social media influencers, is when they don't think they're being told the truth, or when they think the information is being withheld from them. A lot of the distrust is actually coming from an information problem. So I think that void is also what is driving people towards conspiracy theories.
If you're a business leader or a marketing leader, this is the sort of noise you're trying to cut through in your communications with employees and customers. Of course, some of it's not new. Social media has been amplifying things like conspiracy theories for many, many years, if not decades now. But the unique conditions created by COVID-19, I think, are particularly challenging here. Barriers between home and work are being broken down, and basically almost all of our communication is coming to us online and increasingly via social media. It's creating quite an unusual amount of interference in some sense for leaders and brands, and distraction on the part of their audiences and customers. So with this in mind, I've found what my colleague Rhonda Hattie, an Associate Professor of Marketing at Oxford Said, I found what Rhonda had to say to be particularly important and positive.
It's sort of almost paradoxical to think that in some ways we're more isolated than we ever have been, and loneliness is on the rise. But at the same time, we're all more joined than ever in this shared experience, regardless of geographic, socioeconomic conditions. And so it's really interesting to sort of think about empathy as this silver lining of the whole crisis. And I can't help but think about how the COVID crisis kind of intersects with Black Lives Matter and greater discussions around diversity and equality. It's interesting to think about how companies now are listening more than ever before, which is obviously a huge part of actually developing empathy. But not only is listening important, but actually understanding the consumer, the customer is important. And so you can really only do that if internally your teams reflect the general market. So I think that the silver lining is, coming out of these crises is a real emphasis on empathy, listening, and greater diversity internally, which are all great things.
Empathy and listening are big universal values, but they're deeply practical for marketers. They indicate ways in which brands can really seize the moment, seize the opportunities of the crisis without being cynical or opportunistic. Associate Fellow and CEO of Magnolia Media Partners, Seth Rogen, gave us some fascinating examples of brands that were able to tread this fine line.
There is a moment of great opportunity here, both from the crisis that we're all facing and the innovation that we're seeing, but also the financial crisis that is ensuing. If you look back at the financial crises of generations before, that has been the point of genesis for some of the greatest brands. But then you also see great legitimate brands that had already existed that used the moment to actually be of service to their customers and build their business. So if you look at something like Kellogg during the moment of the Great Depression, they were by far a secondary brand, but they wound up investing more and lowering their prices by saying to the consumer, we want to be more on your radar. We want to advertise a bit more, but we're also going to reduce our price because we know you're going through a tough time. And in doing that, they demonstrated a genuineness of spirit and of listening to the consumer. And I think if there's any lesson during this time, it's that we don't yet have the answers, but that they will come from listening to these consumers.
Another concept that the crisis is forcing leaders to rediscover in practice is authenticity. This is Alex Connock, a colleague and fellow in management practice in the marketing group here at the Saïd Business School, speaking to this.
We're now in the era of substance. I've seen more university professors on the news and on TV in general in the last month than I've seen in the rest of my life combined, I think. And so the word authenticity, which had become a sort of horrible maligned word, which basically meant I actually walked up the mountain, which I took the Instagram picture of myself on the top of, therefore I'm authentic, has now become something much more meaningful. It's become not just a question of photoshopping yourself in, but it's a question of actually having the substance to be in the conversation at all. Forget about the flim-flam, forget about the celebrity spokesman. People don't want that. People want facts, substance, and real authenticity of a kind that really wasn't present in the past 5 years.
Finally, and this is something that was reflected by all of our speakers in different ways, it's vital that leaders do not lose sight of the human dimension of this crisis. This is about making sure that they protect their staff, they protect their families and friends, they're considerate of home circumstances, and they give back to the community. Or really simply thinking twice before pushing a strong sales message. People, humans, have to come first. Rachel Botsman showed that thinking in this way can produce really positive messages.
This is really a scale issue for many brands in the way that they're communicating, is that the way they're communicating is hope in the sense of world connection and world peace. Whereas actually what we're looking for is smaller stories of hope that feel very real and immediately understandable and relatable to us.
Thanks for watching this summary video. And I think to conclude, really my perspective after speaking to these great thinkers and colleagues and executives and leaders over the course of the series is that there are really 5 takeaways I think that anyone in business, at whatever level you're at, should be thinking about. The first one is empathy. I think we heard that many, many times, that we just have to put ourselves in others' shoes, be empathetic, and really try and understand the human issues that people might be facing over the course of our work relationships, as well as if we're dealing with customers, clients, or consumers. Related to that, the second point is listening. It's more important than ever that we listen to what our colleagues have to say, and indeed in the marketing world, what our customers have to say. That's going to enable us to have a much better message and communicate much more effectively during these difficult and extraordinary times. The third point is diversity. I think we've heard this in many ways as well, but diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, diversity of points of view, but of course also diversity of the backgrounds of people on your teams. Fourth is authenticity. We heard this from a number of leaders talking about the need to make sure that the communications that are going out there into the community, be it our business community and in our organizations, or indeed to our customers, are authentic, they're genuine, they're real, they're coming from a true place. That requires empathy and listening, by the way, and I think diverse points of view too. And then finally, I think it really wraps it up. The fifth point is this is really about humanity. Whilst indeed the COVID-19 crisis and indeed the cultural and social issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion that have also been occurring over the last 6 months have many, many, many impacts on all aspects of our lives. These are human issues. These are human problems, and I think there's a place for all of us in trying to solve and address these problems. As we keep on saying here, we build back better. Thanks for watching, and I hope you can join us again soon.